So we figured that since it's the end of the year and everything's sort of winding down, rather than give a talk about how to use RethinkDB or other details about it, we wanted to do a wrap-up, a year-end review, just to sort of talk about all the exciting things that have happened with RethinkDB in the past year. I would say, so RethinkDB has been around. I'm one of the founders of RethinkDB, and Slava and I started RethinkDB back in 2009. And I think this year has probably been the most exciting year since we started RethinkDB, because a lot of really awesome things happened. So first, just a bit of background. So we're going to just be talking about everything that's happened this past year. Here's a couple things that you might recognize. The team in general, we've just had an amazing time this past year building RethinkDB. This is the team in the office. This is us designing some database features. You can see we have a lot of fun. We also spent a lot of time celebrating all the releases we had. We shipped 4 major releases of RethinkDB this year. This is us doing, this is like the zombie escape, I think, in San Francisco, where you get locked in a room, you have to escape from a zombie. And we had a lot of help along the way. So this is our office dog, Skyla, who helps us build the database by giving lots of love and support. But the big thing that happened this year, which is really exciting, is that RethinkDB shipped the first what we termed production-ready release. So a ton of companies have been building with RethinkDB, and they've been using it in production. But at this point, we decided that it's time to tag RethinkDB as production-ready. So in April, we shipped RethinkDB 2.0, which was the culmination of over 5 years of collective work and hundreds of thousands of lines of code, incredible number of man-hours put into it. And lots of contributions and commitment from the community adding to RethinkDB as well. RethinkDB 2.0 was the first release that we said it's ready for prime time, it's ready for production use. And since then, RethinkDB's growth has just absolutely exploded. What's exciting is that for a long time, people have been sort of following us on Hacker News, following us on Twitter, following us on GitHub. But since labeling RethinkDB as production ready, we've had an enormous number of people ship real production products with it that are in themselves really exciting to talk about. We also announced a official Docker repo, which means we can push out faster updates for users. RethinkDB is available on Linux, on OS X, most common distributions of Linux. OS X has over 100,000 users at this point, and we have a Windows port that's well underway. We already have an alpha, so at this point, RethinkDB is running on Windows. You can download an alpha build and start playing with it. But we'll have a full port that's going to be coming soon. I would say Windows was probably the most requested platform for RethinkDB by far, and we're really excited that we're actually going to be able to ship it. On top of that, you can run RethinkDB at this point on Amazon Web Services, on our friends at Compose.io for hosted RethinkDB, and a number of other platforms. Our goal was basically to get more people using RethinkDB by putting out onto more platforms, get more people using it, get more people to play with it. And this year, since the growth rate has just spiked dramatically, it seems like we've accomplished that goal. Another big release that we literally just shipped, I would say in the past month, was we finally announced RethinkDB for Java. So Java was the most requested driver by far for RethinkDB, aside from the official official drivers we already have for Python, Ruby, and JavaScript. And that's thanks to the hard work of Josh and Watts. So we're really excited because now it means that RethinkDB is available for Java, which was by far the community that wanted RethinkDB the most. But it also means that every language on the JVM becomes accessible. So that means Scala, Clojure, and every other language now has an official driver at the bottom, at the base, to be able to build on top of, to be able to have a first-class experience with RethinkDB. And so really, this whole year, we've basically been, the storyline has been around real-time apps. In past years, RethinkDB has been growing as a database. It's a very good general-purpose document database. But the energy this year has really been about real-time apps. That's sort of the thing that we noticed, is that all of our users started to build these kinds of real-time apps and started to build really exciting applications with it. And so in the number of community drivers that are available at this point, it's over 20 active community drivers. A number of them have this real-time support baked into it. We have languages as wonderful and esoteric as C#, Common Lisp, Elixir, Go, Node.js, R, Nim. You name a language, there's probably a RethinkDB driver for it. And as we released a lot of this real-time support, we noticed more and more drivers starting to bake in these change feeds, the real-time functionality. One product that shipped this year, which is really exciting, is Jive Communications. As an example, they were building real-time messaging for teams. And building this real-time component, RethinkDB has this ability to open streams on any query within the database. So you can write queries and you write them whatever languages you want. As you can tell, there's languages like JavaScript, Go, Elixir, whatever language you're using. You can build these chains, these expressions, distributed expressions that run on the cluster, and you can open a stream on that query, and you get push notifications whenever that query updates, whenever a document is modified, added, removed, or if the query updates, you get sent a little ping. And so Jive was looking at building real-time messaging for teams. They're building basically kind of like a Slack competitor, but for workplace communication. And rather than build the real-time component, they leaned on RethinkDB not just for the database component, but also for the ability to build these massively parallelized real-time streams. Another example of people building with RethinkDB at scale, we had a really great talk. You can find this on our YouTube channel. This gentleman is Travell Perkins, who built RethinkDB, a really scalable solution at Fidelity. And what's really interesting is that he talked about RethinkDB at fundamental scale. Fidelity scale is obviously anything they do is just absolutely enormous. So if you're interested in how people are running RethinkDB in very large installations, you may want to go check out that talk on YouTube. It goes into a lot of depth, a lot of detail, and particularly the Q&A. It's very interesting, very exciting. And so it's really interesting to hear him talk about what it was like to put RethinkDB into production in very, very large use cases. Another example of people using real-time functionality in surprising ways, and how we keep seeing companies adopting real-time across the board and using RethinkDB for these use cases, is NextGXDX. So they're a really great company out of Nashville, and what they do is they provide genetic testing services. And so they have another talk. You can watch the YouTube clip on our YouTube channel. And they're describing basically what they do is they have to maintain updates on a real-time marketplace for genetic test data. So they're trying to figure out what are the latest genetic tests available for particular patients and then matching them. And in their case, they were using real-time streams to be able to continuously but get pushed updates on what's happening in those marketplaces. Another example is Compose.io. So Compose.io has had RethinkDB in production for a while. They also were the first company to put RethinkDB hosted in the cloud. So if you guys want to play with RethinkDB, if you haven't figured out a way to sort of get an instance up and running yet, I urge you to check out Compose.io. They give you a really great setup for a reasonable price where you get 3 nodes. So you have automatic failover. If machines go down, it'll automatically pick up and take over where it's left off. They're really good at running databases in general. They offer like Mongo, Elasticsearch, Redis, and a number of other databases. And the big news for them is that they were recently acquired by IBM. So that means that RethinkDB is now in IBM's Bluemix and in general hosted by IBM. So these guys are all examples of people who've been adopted RethinkDB early and have been sort of helping us figure out what it's like to run RethinkDB real-time apps like at scale. So by the numbers, so RethinkDB at this point, it's an open source project fundamentally. We're actually one of the largest open source projects on GitHub overall. We're definitely in the top 10 for C++. And so at this point, we basically more than doubled the number of stars on GitHub. We just crossed the 11,000 star threshold on GitHub recently, which is great. A lot of visibility for the project. And at this point, that places us as the #1 document database on GitHub and #2 database overall behind, I think, only Redis. So in terms of popularity, a lot of people have been playing with RethinkDB and then finding out about it because of things like GitHub. And in general, there were over 32,000 commits this year alone to RethinkDB. A lot of activity, a lot of major progress in areas as far as driver development, as I mentioned, a port to Windows, low-level changes to the clustering engine, a lot of very fundamental changes. And what's even more exciting, and this is great because for a long time, the team was building RethinkDB in like a closed space, like together. We're a very passionate group of developers who fundamentally care about open source, and we all interact like it's open source. We do all work out in the open on GitHub. There's no private trackers. It's all happened straight on GitHub issues. If you guys want to go follow all the discussions, just follow the repo. There's hundreds of people who watch every single day to follow all the updates and get involved in the discussion. And what's really exciting to us is that we had well over 1,100 individual community contributions to RethinkDB, which is awesome because it used to be just us. And now it feels like we have over 150 active collaborators around the world building it with us, and that's growing every single day. And on top of that, there's a ton of people who are just making contributions for their ecosystem, for their use cases, and just teaching us about how they're building real-time apps with RethinkDB. And that's been massive because it makes us feel very connected to the people who are using it, but it also meshes very well with our love for open source. In general, we've done enormous amounts of reach out this year. We try to get out into the world more to tell more people about RethinkDB. I credit Christina, our community manager, for doing an extremely amazing job of just getting out and like connecting with users around the world. It's not an easy job by any means. And at this point, we now have 9 official meetups on a regular basis around the world in places as far away for us as Tel Aviv, Nashville, Mumbai, Salt Lake City, Brazil, and this one right here in San Francisco. So most of the talks, we have about 50 plus videos I think we posted this year on our YouTube channel. Talks about everything from how to use RethinkDB, examples of people using it in production, specific projects people have built to make it easier to work with RethinkDB, low-level architecture and mechanics. And in general, those videos, a lot of them have been filmed here in San Francisco at Heavybit. We're very grateful to Heavybit for hosting us. It's been an amazing way for us to plant the seed for our community. We started here in San Francisco in Silicon Valley, and at this point, it's spread around the world. We've also been lucky enough to attend an enormous number of conferences this year talking about RethinkDB and getting the word out. More than that, we have 2 amazing programs. One is Shirts for Stories. If you guys haven't done this yet, you can fill out a form on our website to tell us how you're using it, and you'll get a nice RethinkDB t-shirt, super comfortable, nice to wear. And we've shipped out countless number of shirts. And more than that, we have a box. If you want to start a meetup in your own town, if you guys have friends who are interested in RethinkDB, we'll send you a box. And inside the box, it gives you everything you need to run your own meetup, how to do it, all the swag, all the things you need, and gets you connected with our team. And we're really excited mostly about, for us, the biggest thing in the past couple of months has been we love Slack. We use Slack every single day internally. And so we added a public Slack channel. So if you guys haven't already joined, please do. It's over 500 plus people already in the past couple of months have signed up. And it's an incredibly positive community. I'm always taken aback by how friendly people are and how willing they are to help each other figure out sort of how do I design my architecture? How do I use this query? How do I optimize it? And we generally just hang out there all day long. So you can find me on Slack. I'm M. Glukhov, easy to reach. Please reach out to me. I love always hearing from people who play with RethinkDB or have feedback. And it's a great way to sort of just talk to us and get feedback on how to build these kinds of real-time apps. Because people there have a lot of expertise in this. And so one of the other things we did is we started a regular webcast series. This is me with our director of engineering, Daniel Muse, giving a webcast. We're going to start to do more of these sort of streaming live webcasts. The goal is that instead of doing office hours in one location, we want to do it at scale. So you guys can just reach out to us. We do it on a regular basis and just post questions. We'll try to answer as many in depth as we can. And it's really enjoyable because it gives us an opportunity to engage with the very vibrant community in a very different way. This is us at OzCon at the GitHub booth. They were lucky enough to help us crash with them, so we were able to be at OzCon this year. And this is us talking about RethinkDB with some very excited user. So this year we had a lot of good fortune running to other database companies. So this is one of the MongoDB guys who challenged us at Guitar Hero. I'm glad to say that we won. We defended the title, but we have a lot of friends in the database community who we all hang out with out in the community at this point, which is really exciting. So I want to talk a bit more about, now I've sort of talked about what's happened with the community. I want to focus on the technology because that's what really matters. So we shipped, after RethinkDB 2.0, the primary goal of that release was to label it production ready. After that, we shipped RethinkDB 2.1. And 2.1 was a very interesting release because it took us roughly, I would say about like 10 plus months, or maybe over a year of development to actually be able to ship this. And the reason why is because 2.1 was probably the biggest release we'd ever had in terms of a rewrite. Because we took the entire clustering engine and we rebuilt it to introduce automatic failover. So prior to 2.1, if you had multiple nodes in a RethinkDB cluster and a node went down, you'd have to log into the system and manually click a button to be able to, or write a command, to be able to nominate the next node or re-elect the next node to take over. And in a distributed system, that's a little bit frustrating because you want it to just keep working. The problem is that the problem around how do you decide what node comes up and when? It's a very complicated problem. There are like lots of theorems and papers have been published about how to do this best. Most of them are incredibly complicated. Most of them are hard to understand. They're complex edge cases. And in fact, if you guys are familiar with the Call Me Maybe series by Afer, it's a great series if you haven't read it yet on distributed systems. It teaches a lot about why these problems are so hard, and he takes the time to go through systems that people use in production nowadays and isolates issues with those systems and tries to explain, here's where it failed, here's how they should have fixed it. And so if you go read that series, you might get a good appreciation for the depth of the problems involved with automatic failover. So we took our time building it. And there was a new paper that was published recently by Diego, it's a gentleman named Diego, and a number of other researchers at Stanford. And the algorithm that they discuss, its first goal was to be easy to understand, which is a good goal for a paper about complex systems. And so the name of the system they came up with, the idea was Raft. There have been a number of implementations that have come out since then. We decided we needed to build our own for RethinkDB because of the way that RethinkDB is built, the architecture. We wanted to make sure that we built it so that it would work well for RethinkDB. So we took about a year plus of work to basically build Raft, to test it. We used Afer's, the gentleman who runs the Call Me Maybe series. He has a testing tool called Jepsen, because Call Me Maybe, Carly Rae Jepsen, makes sense. So Jepsen is a really great tool for simulating distributed systems and failures within them. And we actually contracted Afer recently to test our Raft implementation. And I can't give any details yet, but things look very, very good. And there should be a full report coming out pretty soon. But the idea is that basically with RethinkDB 2.1, as long as you have 3 nodes, at least 3 nodes in the system, when nodes go down, it'll automatically fail over to another node. And so what this means is that you can run RethinkDB clusters, and as long as it has 3 nodes, you're able to just have no service interruption, and you're able to scale it easily, and then you're able to not have to deal with concerns around failover. The other big release the other big feature that released in RethinkDB 2.1 was we added an async backend to the Python driver. Node.js is, by its very nature, asynchronous. So a lot of JavaScript users had great async support, but Python did not. With async IO backend in RethinkDB 2.1, using things like Event Machine or Twisted and Tornado, you're able to actually build these scalable real-time apps in Python now. A lot of what we do happens at the database level, and so we rely on the driver to be able to manage the asynchronous behavior to actually allow you to open lots of streams in parallel and to be able to have lots of streams open with the database. And so what's exciting about that is actually in general, the Python world is experiencing a lot of exciting changes because in Python 3.4, they added implementations for coroutines and a lot of other async low-level tools. That's going to make it a lot more pleasant for Python developers to be able to build these kinds of scalable asynchronous stream-based applications. And so I want to talk about the next release now, which is RethinkDB 2.2. We just shipped 2.2 about, I would say, a month and a half ago. I think that's correct. And 2.2 introduced a couple major features. One was atomic change feeds. So in RethinkDB, I've talked about these queries, these streams rather, you can open on queries. These streams that allow you to receive notifications when things change. And we call them change feeds. Change feeds are the basic primitive, the basic low-level utility that RethinkDB has, that on top of which all of the scalable real-time stuff is built on top of. And one of the big issues that we had was that if you have a client that is connected to the cluster and it's receiving updates, and then it loses its connection and comes back, there's a chance that it may have missed a number of updates. And so what atomic change feeds let you do is it introduces atomicity into this primitive. And it allows you to basically replay everything that's happened in the table from the beginning, and it represents it as a change stream. Which means that if you have a client lose connection with the server, when it reconnects, it can just say, now play me back from the beginning because I lost my connection, and it'll seem like they're just changes that are pouring in. So the code remains simple. You don't have to have multiple code paths to manage different state. And the idea is that our goal is to make every app that's built on top of RethinkDB not care about state, not think about what state it's in. Its whole goal is just to listen for updates from the database and just receive it as a stream of updates. So RethinkDB 2.2 made building this class of, solving this class of problems a lot easier. More importantly, it included a huge performance boost in a lot of areas. One of the biggest issues was around performance issues with secondary indexes. They worked, but they could have been a lot more performant. So it was a lot of low-level architecture that went into making secondary indexes a lot faster, and in general, just a lot of tweaks across the board. Our goal since 2.0 has been to make every single aspect of the real-time and change feed components richer, more robust, and to make the database itself faster and more performant. And that's been the 2 vectors that we've pursued since 2.0. And so this 2.2 addressed a lot of chief concerns around that. So that brings me to something I want to talk about, which is upcoming for RethinkDB. How many of you guys have been to previous RethinkDB meetups? Can you raise your hand? Okay, so there's a couple folks who aren't familiar with RethinkDB or haven't seen talks about this before. I'm going to first explain how RethinkDB works for real-time apps, and I want to talk about this really exciting project. So when you build an app in RethinkDB, normally you have your cluster. You'll set up a few nodes. It'll automatically scale and replicate for you. You set up whatever configuration you want. You can do it across data centers. You can do it across machines. And you're able to have this scalable backend for the database. You can open these streams on any query in the system. And then your apps, you'll add like a middleware layer. Let's say you're building in JavaScript. You use Node.js. And you would use a tool like Socket.io, which is a great library for building these asynchronous applications. And you use Socket.io to take each change notification from RethinkDB and pass it up to the client. And your client would be written in, let's say, something like React or Angular. And then that change notification will be applied to your front end. So you have this architecture where you have your backend, which is RethinkDB, or your database, rather, which is RethinkDB. Then you have your backend, which is your Node app, or your Python app, or Ruby app. And then you have on the front end, you have your real-time framework, which is something like React or Angular, anything that thinks about the world in terms of reacting to data, which is where the front-end world is very firmly headed. The thing is that it's kind of challenging to build this kind of architecture if you haven't thought about it before. You have to think about a lot of considerations. You have to fit a lot of pieces of software together. And it's a little bit challenging if all you want to do is just build a React app and you just want to have it running on top of a backend. And so what we decided to do, RethinkDB is a very good general purpose database. It's very good for lots of different kinds of operations. But we decided to build a complete stack that picks one vector firmly and says this is a very comfortable backend to use that you can just run your React app on without any backend whatsoever. So the idea is that with this project, we call it Project Fusion. We haven't named it yet, but for now it's just codename Fusion. And it fuses the database to the browser. The idea is that you're able to have RethinkDB with no backend. And you just put your React or Angular app directly on top of it. What's really exciting about this, so what it feels like you have this client-side API that you just interact with. You have like a native data structure that's living in the browser on the client side. And meanwhile, what Fusion does is it pushes everything down to RethinkDB, and it handles all the real-time connectivity, all of the authentication, all the permissions, security model, all the details you normally have to think about, you just don't have to think about with Fusion. And when you're ready to graduate to a full backend, you can then take the library and then move it to the node layer. And now you have the same queries and same commands apply, but you're able to extend it with your own custom queries. And so the goal is to make it so it's dead simple to get started. You can run it directly, your React app directly on top of this backend. RethinkDB is running under the hood. It's the fundamental engine that's driving the entire real-time backend. And then you can extend it when you need custom functionality. And it's going to feel like it's just this very powerful backend that's very complete. And you don't have to think about the fact that it's a database and a server and a different library. It just handles the entire aspect for you. It'll feel very much like services you may be familiar with out there, like Parser, Firebase, things like that, where they offer you a backend with different features. In this case, it'll be open source, top to bottom, self-hosted, run on your laptop, deployed to the cloud. And the entire thing, because it's built on top of this real-time database, RethinkDB is the only database that does real-time push on queries. And it's all event-driven from top to bottom. So it's going to be, the entire stack will just feel like it's real-time, event-driven by default. Our goal is to make building real-time apps easier to build than normal applications. And our belief is that all apps will become real-time apps. So this is coming soon. If you guys want to apply, we have a little form you can fill out to get early access. It's going to be open source, but we're baking it in a very closed fashion because we want to make sure it develops and then we're going to put it out in the world. But if you want to be part of the development process, come talk to me. You can email me at mike@rethinkdb.com, or you can find me on Slack. Again, my name is Glukhovsky. You can fill out a little form, and we'll put you on a list to get early access for Fusion. We think it's really exciting. We think it's where app development is headed, is the idea of having this complete backend. And we think that Fusion is going to allow you to bring whatever best-in-breed open source technology you want, and you'll be able to build these applications in a dead simple fashion. So that's all I have for you guys. As per usual, if you want to get started with RethinkDB, if you don't know much about it, I'm happy to come talk to you later about it. But you can get started very simply going to rethinkdb.com/install, check the docs out, follow us on Twitter. I'm excited to hear about what you guys are building with RethinkDB, so please find me on Slack. Do we have any questions?